Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Muhammad Layak Sadiqi, the father of all of his. Pattern comes first. Phi is primitive comparability. Phi is circular, so only relations are public. We read patterns through windows, differences, lifts, jets, boundaries, topology, identity, canonicalization, and invariant cores. Now we ask a deeper question. How does a pattern remain itself through change? There is a quiet assumption hiding inside almost every human thought. We see a tree today and say it is the same tree we saw yesterday. We hear a melody played on another instrument and say it is the same melody. We look at our own face in the mirror and say we are the same person we were years ago. We speak this way so naturally that we rarely stop to ask what we really mean. But now, after everything we have built, we can no longer afford to speak casually. We have already learned that pattern is not a thing sitting there with a ready-made label attached to it. A pattern is not simply there in the way ordinary habit imagines. A pattern is public structure. It is readable only through declared windows. It is known only through lawful comparison. It has local signatures, global memory, boundaries, defects, and invariant cores. It is never given to us all at once. It is disciplined into public knowledge. So now a harder question rises in front of us. How does a pattern remain itself? Not how does it merely continue to exist in some vague sense. Not how does it seem familiar. But how, under rigorous conditions, do we certify that one pattern at one moment or in one description or under one disturbance is still the same pattern later? This is the question of persistence. And the first thing we must say is this: persistence is not automatic. That sentence sounds small, but it changes everything. Ordinary thinking is tempted by what we may call the temptation of thingness. When something looks object-like, we assume it carries its sameness inside itself like a hidden badge. We imagine identity as a substance and persistence as its natural shadow. In that old way of thinking, a thing simply keeps being itself until something dramatic destroys it. Phi pattern science refuses that shortcut. A pattern does not persist merely because we feel it does. A pattern persists only when its invariant identity survives lawful variation within declared limits. Persistence is not a default gift. It is a certified achievement. That is the deep work of this part. Why persistence is not obvious? At first, persistence sounds obvious because everyday life is built on it. Without persistence, language would break, memory would fail, responsibility would dissolve. We could not say that a child became an adult, only that one pattern vanished and another appeared. We could not say a river remained a river through the years. We could not say a nation, a species, a friendship, or a self continued. And yet, once we look closely, persistence becomes slippery. Take the river. Its water changes constantly. Its banks shift. Its depth varies. Sediment moves. Fish come and go. If we focus on material components, the river is never the same. If we focus on geographical role, perhaps it is. If we focus on its legal name, it is. If we focus on molecular content, it is not. Or take a flame. The flame on a candle seems like one stable thing, but the molecules are being replaced every moment. The shape flickers. The brightness varies. What exactly is persisting? The fuel? The color? The process? The role? The pattern of combustion? Or take your own body. Your cells change. Your beliefs change. Your memories fade, grow, distort, deepen. Your face changes. your voice changes. Yet, you do not usually feel like a totally different being each morning. Persistence, then, is not a primitive fact. It is a judgment about which invariants matter, under which transformations, within which tolerances, across which windows. This means persistence cannot be assumed from intuition. It must be built from the structure we already established in earlier parts. We already know what identity means. Two descriptions count as the same pattern if they are related by declared lawful transformation while preserving the relevant invariants within scope. Persistence now extends that identity question across lawful variation. It asks, when change occurs, do the relevant invariants remain stable enough that the pattern can still be re-identified as itself? That is persistence. Let us say it clearly. A phi pattern persists when its invariant identity remains stable under declared perturbation, representation change, window shift, and lawful variation within declared scope, tolerances, and uncertainty bounds. This definition contains several layers, and every word matters. Invariant identity means we are not asking whether every visible feature remains unchanged. We are asking whether the features that define the pattern for the present claim remain intact. Stable means not perfectly frozen, but robust enough to survive lawful change without leaving its identity class. Declared perturbation means we must say what kinds of disturbance we are allowing. Representation change means the pattern should remain identifiable across different encodings, formats, charts, lifts, or gauges. Window shift means the pattern should survive being viewed from different lawful access conditions. Lawful variation means only transformations allowed by the declared framework count in the claim. Scope, tolerances, and uncertainty mean we must say how much variation is allowed, in what context, and with what confidence. Persistence is therefore not just still there, it is identity survival under lawful variation. A story of the tree. Let us return to the tree outside the window. Every day you look at it. In winter, it is bare. In spring, it buds. In summer, it is full. In autumn, it sheds leaves. Storms bend it. Drought weakens it. Birds nest in it. Branches break. Bark peels. New wood grows. Now ask, is it the same tree? The ordinary answer is yes. But phi pattern science asks, yes, in virtue of what? Is it the same because it occupies the same rooted region in the ground? Because it preserves an organismal continuity? Because its growth unfolds from one living developmental core? Because its role in the local ecosystem remains? Because your own window of encounter tracks it continuously? Each of these might matter. Some may matter more than others. Some may fail while others remain. If one small branch snaps in a storm, we do not say the tree has lost its identity. If half the crown is gone, perhaps still not. If the trunk is cut and a new sapling later grows from the stump, things become harder. At some point, the pattern may break. Where is that point? There is no honest answer without declared tolerances. Persistence therefore requires saying, what counts as the core identity of this tree? What forms of variation are permitted? What degree of structural loss breaks identity? And how uncertain we are about that boundary. Without this, same tree is only habit speaking. With it, persistence becomes a lawful claim. 4. The main dimensions of persistence. Persistence is not one simple property. It has several dimensions. A. Stability under perturbation. A pattern may face disturbance, noise, impact, pressure, heat, interference, drift, mutation, or ordinary environmental fluctuation. A persistent pattern survives some class of such perturbations while retaining its defining invariants. Think of a melody played slightly faster or slower, or with small expressive changes. It is still the same melody. Think of a spinning top that wobbles but stays upright. Think of a coastline that changes slightly with the tide yet preserves its larger form. The claim must state what counts as a permissible perturbation, small compared to what, in which regime, stability under representation. A pattern should be recognizable across lawful changes in description. A spiral drawn in blue ink and the same spiral encoded as a mathematical rule are different representations. A digital image stored in one file format and the same image stored in another are different encodings. A melody in a score, a recording, and a humming voice are different representations. If the invariant structure survives these shifts, the pattern persists under representation change. C. Stability under window shift. A pattern may appear differently under different windows. One microscope sees one scale, another sees a finer scale. One telescope catches one wavelength, another catches another. One camera sees from the front, another from the side. Persistence asks whether the pattern can still be lawfully re-identified across those shifts. This is essential because in real science, we almost never observe under one perfect window. We move across windows constantly. D. Stability under transformation family. Some transformations are part of the pattern's lawful equivalence class. Translation, rotation, reparameterization, gauge shift, chart change, and so on. A pattern persists if it remains within identity under the declared family of allowable transformations. This is closely tied to Part 17 on identity, but persistence adds the question of endurance across a family of lawful variations rather than one isolated comparison. 5. Tolerances, the hidden heart of persistence. Persistence claims live or die by tolerances. A tolerance is a declared boundary of acceptable change. It says, this much variation still counts as the same pattern. More than this does not. Without tolerances, persistence claims become vague and self-protective. A person can always say, it is basically the same or close enough, unless forced to specify what enough means. Imagine a face recognition system. If the tolerance is too strict, the same person under different lighting will be classified as different. If the tolerance is too loose, two different people may be treated as the same. The meaning of persistence depends on the declared tolerance. Or imagine tracking a storm system. A slight change in pressure shape or location should not create a new storm every hour. But if the structure changes too much, persistence fails. Again, tolerances decide the line. In phi-pattern science, tolerance cannot remain hidden. An honest persistence claim must state which invariants are being protected, how much change in each is permitted, how those limits were chosen, and what observations would count as identity failure. Tolerances are not embarrassing compromises. They are part of the truth of the claim. 6. Uncertainty and the honesty of boundaries. Even with tolerances declared, persistence is rarely sharp. There are borderline cases. A language persists through centuries, but at what point does Latin become Italian? A species persists through evolution, but at what point does one lineage become another? A city persists through rebuilding, migration, and institutional change, but where exactly is the line between continuity and replacement? The world is full of soft edges. That is why uncertainty belongs inside every serious persistence claim. We must say not only what we believe persists, but how uncertain we are near the boundary. Perhaps we can certify persistence confidently in one range, deny it confidently in another, and admit uncertainty in between. This is not weakness, it is disciplined honesty. The opposite is far worse, pretending certainty where the boundary is blurry. 7. Conditional persistence. Persistence is often conditional rather than universal. A pattern may persist under one regime and fail under another. Ice persists as ice under low temperature. Raise the temperature and the pattern crosses a threshold. A biological population may persist under stable ecological conditions but collapse under habitat loss. A social institution may persist through routine leadership change but not through total legal dissolution. So persistence claims must be regime sensitive. They must say, this pattern persists under these conditions for these perturbations within these windows under these tolerances. That means a pattern may be persistent in one scope and non-persistent in another without contradiction. This is not inconsistency, it is precision. 8. Persistence and the invariant core. In part 19, we learned that deep understanding means finding the invariant generating core of a pattern. That insight now becomes essential. Persistence is never about preserving every surface detail. It is about preserving the core that generates the pattern's relevant identity. Think again of the melody. The exact loudness may vary. The instrument may change. The tempo may shift slightly. But if the interval structure and rhythmic relation remain, the melody persists. Think of a language. The vocabulary evolves, pronunciation shifts, grammar drifts. Yet some core relational structure may endure long enough that we still recognize a continuous language history. Think of an organism. Cells die and are replaced. The persistence lies not in static matter, but in organized continuity of structure, metabolism, and developmental relation. So persistence depends on identifying what in the pattern is core and what is surface. That is why part 19 had to come before part 20. Without a core, persistence is blind. 9. A story of the river revisited. The river is a perfect teacher here. Suppose we define the river's core as a continuous drainage path through a watershed, a recognizable channeling role in the terrain, continuity of hydrological relation to upstream and downstream regions. Now, small fluctuations in water level do not break identity. Seasonal shifts do not break it. Even modest changes in the river's course may not break it. The pattern persists. But if the river is permanently diverted into a new basin, or dries entirely, or is replaced by a concrete canal no longer serving the same hydrological role, the core may fail. Again, persistence is not about every visible detail. It is about whether the core survives. 10. Window shift and false persistence failure. One of the most subtle dangers in persistence claims is confusing a change in window with a change in pattern. Suppose a microbial pattern is visible only under ultraviolet imaging. You first observe it with one instrument and later fail to see it with a different instrument that lacks the needed resolution. Has the pattern ceased to persist? Not necessarily. The mismatch may be in the windows, not in the pattern. Or suppose a galaxy appears smooth in one telescope but highly structured in another. The pattern did not suddenly become complex. The window changed. This means persistence assessments must align windows before drawing conclusions. A pattern may persist while its legibility changes, or it may fail to persist while remaining partially legible. These are different questions. That is why this part prepares the bridge to existence versus legibility. Persistence is not primitive time. There is one more danger. It is easy to define persistence by silently importing ordinary time as a primitive background, the same thing at two times. But in this framework, time is itself a readout of pattern, not a primitive container. So persistence must not smuggle in primitive time. Instead, persistence is defined more carefully. Identity survival across a declared family of lawful variations, among which time-like sequence may be one readout, but not the metaphysical base. This matters because it keeps the framework consistent. We do not build persistence on a background we have already refused to treat as primitive. 12. The persistence gate. All of this leads to a formal discipline. A persistence claim must pass the persistence gate. To pass, it must declare the invariant identity criteria being tracked, the tolerated range of variation, the perturbation class, the family of windows across which persistence is assessed, the uncertainty bounds, and the break conditions that would count as identity failure. This matters because persistence claims are powerful. Once you say something persists, you allow memory, continuity, responsibility, modeling, and prediction to build on that claim. So the claim must be strict. A weakly declared persistence claim is not merely imprecise, it is dangerous. It can smuggle continuity where only habit exists. What this part installs. By the end of this part, several things become locked. First, persistence is no longer intuitive sameness. It is certifiable stability behavior. Second, stability becomes disciplined language. We no longer use the word casually. Stable with respect to what? Under what perturbation? In what regime? Across what windows? Those questions now become mandatory. Third, we now have a bridge toward existence versus legibility, null pattern certification, later dynamics, objecthood, and observer continuity. Because once we know what it means for a pattern to remain itself, we can ask what it means for it to exist without being readable, or to fail to be certifiable at all. Refusal conditions. A persistence claim must be refused if identity criteria are not declared, tolerances are hidden, break conditions are undefined, uncertainty is too large for reliable re-identification, or persistence is simply assumed from familiarity. This refusal is not bureaucratic harshness. It is the framework protecting itself from lazy continuity. A good science must know when it has not earned the right to say the same. The human meaning of persistence. This part is not only scientific, it is existential. Every life is a persistence problem. Am I the same person I was 10 years ago? In one sense, no. In another sense, yes. But that answer is not magical. It depends on what invariants I treat as central. Memory, narrative continuity, body, commitments, values, relationships, responsibilities. A friendship persists through conflict only if some core survives. A culture persists through migration only if some invariant generating structure remains. A tradition persists through adaptation only if the changes do not break its core. So persistence is not just a technical idea. It is one of the deepest structures of meaning in human life. We live by persistence claims. We love by them. We remember by them. We suffer through them. We heal through them. Five pattern science does not make this less human. It makes it more honest. So let us gather the essence. A pattern does not persist because it looks familiar. A pattern does not persist because thinness whispers that it should. A pattern persists only when its invariant identity survives lawful variation within declared scope, tolerances, and uncertainty. That is the heart of this part. Persistence is not automatic continuity, it is certified continuity. And once we understand that, two immediate questions arise. First, what if a pattern is really there, but our windows cannot read it? Second, what if no pattern is certifiable at all? Those questions force an even deeper humility. They lead us next to the distinction between existence and legibility, and then to the discipline of the null pattern. That is where the journey goes next. Always, peace be upon you.